name is Amatullah Contractor, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Mgage, Texas. I am speaking today on behalf of myself, my Muslim and Asian communities, and the millions of Texans who are undoubtedly going to lose their electoral power in this upcoming redistricting session. Voices of this state silenced because some people in positions of power will decide that their seats are more valuable to them than their oath of public service. These voices are people of color, low-income voters, differently abled voters, and more. We are witnessing a crusade against morality, and I urge our legislators to reconsider their chosen path. Reverend Barber said it best, and I want to convey his reminder to you all. When you uphold the Constitution, you don't swear to be liberal, you don't swear to be conservative, you don't swear to be independent, you swear to uphold. You swear to establish justice. You ensure that no one denies or abridges the right to vote. You swear to protect equal protection under the law. The maps we see today, presented by the Texas Legislature, are a direct contradiction of your oath of office. And these lines that you are securing today will hold for the next 10 years and with ramifications to be felt decades after. I should not have to plead with you to not dilute my voting power. And yet, historical racial gerrymandering has forced me to testify here. In 2010, the Department of Justice contended that the Texas State Legislature's redistricting plan diluted the voting power of Asian Americans and other people of color. Asians are the fastest growing ethnic group in the United States, and yet our voices are continually silenced and our needs unmet by those elected to serve us. We need community districting. We cannot have legislators draw lines and simply color them in as they please, because those lines hold our lives in the balance. The lines drawn with surgical precision to dilute the voices of the working class and people of color are what has allowed for egregious voter suppression, anti-women, anti-healthcare bills to become law in this state. But if our elected officials continue to ignore our demands, we will simply get louder. We cannot defeat extremism with moderation and sacrifice. We will continue to speak up, stand up, and march on because the power of the people will not be ignored.
My name is Shirley Ronquillo, and I am the co-founder of the Houston Department of Transformation. We are a resident-led group that strives to engage residents in civic action to create safe and beautiful communities. I live in the East Auding community in Northeast Houston, Texas. My community is in unincorporated Harris County because of one imaginary line. This line prevents my community from having regulated drinking water, access to adequate health care, and updated drainage and infrastructure to prevent flooding since I live outside the city jurisdiction by one street. My community is facing mandatory buyouts and breaking up 6 generations of family because of gerrymandering that separates the predominantly Latino and African American families along Greens Bayou and Halls Bayou. Texas District 140 lines were drawn to exclude my community from having any say in what flood mitigation funding efforts occur in neighboring Texas House District 141, a historically African American district. I also realized my district excluded from the economic growth of our airport system located in Texas House District 141, the industrial sector which surrounds it, adequate health services as my district does not have a hospital, and the employment opportunities it offers. You see, gerrymandering by race has given us a perception that we should drive 30 to 60 minutes south rather than seek employment or healthcare on the other side of Beltway 8, only 8 to 10 minutes away. When I heard of the Texas Senate Redistricting Committee hearings and the opportunity to impact district maps, I learned many of our neighbors were unaware of the opportunity to provide their input. We sought support from the Committee for Spanish Interpreters, only to find there were none. I don't understand why language justice was not a priority in a predominantly Latino state where Latinos make up 41.4% of the total population in Texas, according to the 2020 census data. As usual, our community pulled together to give my Spanish-speaking neighbors a voice. The League of Women Voters hired an interpreter for us, and Baker Ripley East Auding allowed us to use their conference room so we could safely social distance and give testimonies. We soon found other communities with other language needs, such as Vietnamese or Arabic, did not have any support either. In partnership with many organizations across Texas, the League of Women Voters launched a language justice campaign to close the language gap and give a voice to many. Texas cannot continue to exclude community members like myself from giving input and providing feedback on the final maps. Fair districting will set the foundation for the next 10 years and give our community a chance at equal and fair representation. I hope our elected officials will listen to us, fight for us, and meet the needs of our community. Thank you.
Estimados miembros del Comité de Redistribución de Texas, mi nombre es Perla García, hablo español y me gustaría que intérpretes fueran proporcionados para que más residentes de habla hispana interpreten.
My name is, dear members of the Texas Redistricting Committee, my name is Perla Garcia. I speak Spanish and I would like for interpreters to be provided so that more residents who speak Spanish and other languages can give their testimony.
Vivo en el distrito de la Cámara de Representantes de Texas 141 y en el distrito del Senado de Texas 6.
I live in Texas House District 141 and Texas Senate District 6.
Mi comunidad consta de familias hispanas, niños menores y es un área de muchas generaciones.
My community consists of Hispanic families, young children, and is a multi-generational area.
Mi comunidad enfrenta dificultades que incluyen falta de drenaje para no estarnos inundando frecuentemente.
My community faces difficulties that include lack of drainage, so we are flooded frequently.
Recursos económicos para las personas para los desalojos mandatorios para personas sin estatus legal.
Financial resources for mandatory evictions for people without legal status.
Falta de seguridad en el área.
And lack of security in the area.
Mi experiencia con Harvey fue horrible.
My experience with Harvey was horrible.
Me sacaron los bomberos. Me dejaron en una escuela porque un camión pasaría por nosotros.
I was pulled out by the fire department, left in a school because a truck would come by for us.
Había niños, bebés, adultos mayores.
There were children, babies, seniors.
Pero nunca pasaron. Se hizo de noche y no había dónde dormir.
But they never came by. It got dark and there was no place to sleep.
Una señora afroamericana nos ofreció su casa. Dios la bendiga.
An African-American woman offered us her house. God bless her.
A medianoche fue una amiga a recogernos porque éramos muchos.
And in the middle of the night, a friend came to pick us up because there were so many of us.
Esos días me la pasé de una casa a otra.
I spent those days going from one house to another.
Sin ayuda del Estado.
Without any help from the state.
Siento que como hispana se nos niegan muchas ayudas o servicios.
I feel that as a Hispanic, we're denied a lot of help or services.
Texas no está preparado para ningún tipo de desastre natural.
Texas is not prepared for any type of natural disaster.
Cuando lleguen los datos del censo y se dibujen los mapas nuevos,
when the census data comes in and the maps are redrawn,
mantengan a mi comunidad unida.
Keep my community together.
Tenemos intereses y objetivos compartidos. Queremos una representación justa y efectiva.
We have shared interests and shared goals. We want fair and effective representation.
Esto es muy importante para mí, que mi voz sea escuchada. Gracias por su atención.
This is very important to me, that my voice is heard. Thank you for your attention.
Members of the committee, my name is Judson Robinson III. I serve as president of the Houston affiliate of the Urban League. 90 national Urban Leagues affiliates across the country represent this organization. For generations, we have worked in under-resourced communities, striving for a shot at the American dream, while living in their communities, paying their taxes in return for safe and stable economic living environments. We have worked on these communities on behalf of Houston since 1968, creating jobs and encouraging small businesses to develop and affordable housing in the neighborhoods where they already live. Maintaining a diverse community with people reflective of multiple backgrounds, incomes, interests, and historical perspectives builds a rich, vibrant culture of different people, all enjoying the fruits of an economically sustainable living environment. Preserving the delicacy of these human ecosystems takes conscientious leadership, capable of displaying courage and fairness to protect those in need of quality representation, willing to listen, hear the discussions, and allow it to impact their decisions. We work with historically Black communities, such as Sunnyside, Acres Home, the 3rd Ward, and the 5th Ward, where people are experiencing massive shifts in population since the last census. 3rd Ward in particular has gone from a 70% Black population to a little over 40% in just the past decade. People moving, not because they want to, but because they're being forced out. You have to incorporate this dilemma into the redistricting process. Community preservation must work hand in hand with community identification and citizen engagement. Drawing lines to simply hold like-minded bodies of people together is not courageous. Packing less influential members of a given group into under-resourced areas, marginalizing their access to safe and affordable housing, or limiting their access to jobs is not leadership. And encouraging lines to be drawn between people that must learn to live with each other. Drawing lines to simply hold like-minded groups together is not courageous. Packing less influential people and members of given groups into under-resourced areas, marginalizing their access to safe and affordable housing, or limiting their access to jobs is not leadership. And encouraging lines to be drawn between people that must learn to live with each other while seeing their differences is a benefit of diversity versus a system of us versus them. This is not a sustainable link for American democracy. As leaders in this redistricting effort, you have an obligation to rise above the chatter of division and ensure redistricting does not further redistribute inequality, but instead increase it. Let's listen to the needs of all in this process and seek fairness and not simply winners and losers. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. My name is Marla Lopez, and I'm the Houston coordinator at Mi Familia Vota. When I first began my work at MFE, it was around the census 2020. And at that point, we were fighting against an administration that wanted to deny the fact that Latinos and our allies are driving population growth and change in Texas and in parts across the nation. The 2020 census showed us what we already knew to be true, that Texas is diverse, it's young, and it's changing every single day. Over 50% of growth in Texas alone comes from the Latino population, comes from immigrants, and it comes from our allies. But these numbers only tell you part of the story of how the population has changed, where communities are growing and moving, and where resources or money needs to go, including political representation in the form of district lines that are going to be moving this redistricting cycle. The people in Houston and across Harris County could tell you what that really looks like, though, because they've lived it. They are the experts in what it means to be marginalized and have their voices and issues ignored, and the consequences of being pushed aside for partisan political power. The problems that we faced in the last 10 years, and even the past 2 years with the pandemic, chemical explosions, and even the winter storm are direct consequences of how state legislators drew our maps in 2010. They were designed to minimize voters of color and ruin our representation as constituents in Harris County, in Houston, and even across the state. This is a moral issue because it has cost us our lives. It's cost us our families, our homes, our communities, and it could cost us our futures too. But in order to break this vicious cycle, we must center community voices in the process of redrawing the maps in ways that are fair, open, accessible, and accountable to everyday people. It's our chance to make sure that we get things right and we get ready for the next 10 years. We must have our voices heard and our neighborhoods and futures kept whole and united.
Over the last 10 years, I've lived in Travis County, Harris County, and Fort Bend County, where my parents and sisters still reside. As an Asian American and lifelong Texan, I am testifying on the importance of consideration of the Asian American and Pacific Islander, or AAPI community, as census data is considered and new district lines are drawn. The AAPI communities now make up 6.6% of the Texas population, according to the 2020 census. That's more than a 66% increase since the last census. We are the fastest growing racial group across Texas and have historically been unfairly divided into multiple legislative districts. In Fort Bend County, we are 23.6% of the population. In Travis County, 9.5%, and in neighboring Williamson County, 10.6%. Despite this, Texas has never sent an AAPI member to the US Congress. In 2020, my family voted for an AAPI candidate, Sri Kulkarni, who lost by less than 7 points in the gerrymandered congressional district of Texas 22. Congressional District 22 is the fastest growing district in our state, with more than a 39% increase in total population. This consists of a 46% growth of Hispanics and Latinos, 64% growth in African Americans, 46% growth in Native Pacific Islander, and a whopping 78.5% growth amongst Asians, while only a 9% increase in the white population. The communities of color in Fort Bend, they deserve an additional minority opportunity district drawn so that their votes can matter, so that they have the power to finally elect a candidate of their choice, like Sri Kulkarni, who my parents voted for. And by the way, Sri Kulkarni speaks 6 different languages and ran his campaign with volunteers who spoke 16 different languages. That's the kind of representation and access that my community needs. Language access is a major issue in the AAPI communities that will not be addressed without fair representation and fair maps. Redistricting is ultimately tied to voting rights, tied to the type of representation we get, and tied to the type of resources that come into our communities. According to a nonpartisan nonprofit APIA vote, 79% of Asian Americans in Texas speak a language other than English at home, and of those, more than 40% speak English less than very well. After English and Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Hindi, and Tagalog are the next most common languages spoken in the state. Lack of language access has real world and life and death ramifications. Just this past May, my father, a Vietnamese refugee and a Texan of over 30 years, turned 65. Only 2 days after his birthday, he was then diagnosed with stage 4 terminal lung cancer. Because of an administrative error, we were not able to enroll him in Medicare, preventing him from receiving any cancer treatment. Waiting for an appointment with the Social Security Administration with translation services was estimated to take months. For a man with a terminal diagnosis, he didn't have months to wait. Luckily, my sister and I were able to be his translator and advocates, but thousands of Texans do not have this option. The ability to access public services and healthcare should not be determined by luck. Language access is critical to the safety and welfare of Texans like my father. So I urge this committee to establish a fair and open process.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jennifer Cantu, and today we'll be discussing redistricting and how it impacts our everyday daily lives. But first, I want to start with some history. You see, I'm standing on where House District 27 used to be. But due to gerrymandering 1 census ago, House District 27 shifted further north, creating a new House District 85, which would now include a portion of Fort Bend County and 100% of Wharton County and 100% of Jackson County. You see, our needs are not changing, but have continued to be compound, but are continually being ignored. So follow me as I show you these different needs and scenarios, and at the end, I can tell you what you can do about it. we are standing here in front of the WPA NRG Parish Coal Plant. For those that do not know, this is the largest coal plant in the United States of America. The first and the second coal plant, they have been shut down. This is a coal plant that continues to burn SO2, sulfur dioxide, and we have 0 monitors. This is a coal plant that is 5 miles, less than 5 miles away than a high school, a middle school, an elementary school. This is a coal plant where the air will push out and can affect greater than 100,000 families. And why redistricting is very important. I stand here in the heart of Kendleton. Kendleton is both a health desert and a food desert. I am 22 minutes away from the closest emergency services. 22 minutes is the difference between life and death if you're having a heart attack, life and death if you're having a stroke. I ask you, if you lived here, would you permit this to continue to happen? And we draw lines, we must be fair. And I'm here standing between our two beautiful cities of Rosenberg and Richmond. We will be talking about flooding, infrastructure, drainage, and how they have continued to be ignored. And yet we have no resources. And this is when we draw lines, we must make sure these lines are fair. And I want to show you this, so come with me. This area marks all 3 of why it's important. Drainage. I don't know if you can see, but it's yet to be clean. Yet our communities are paying tax dollars. Infrastructure, because as we've seen in this ditch, we continue to have flooding. That even with the smallest of storms, we're hitting those 2 feet and 3 feet markers, yet we've done nothing to elevate. And flooding because the rescue missions that continue to ongo and continue to happen. Hi, thank you for following us today. You see, we've talked about air quality, food deserts, health deserts, flooding outside our homes, and drainage. You see, these issues did not just occur today, but they have continued to be compacted, but more importantly, have been ignored. You see, when drawing of lines are done fairly, they must include our communities of interest. More importantly, our state representative must live here. So I ask that you call your state representative, demand that the drawing of maps be done fairly and transparent. Thank you.
As a student organizer in Fort Bend County, I consistently hear the bold voices of my peers who are marching in pursuit of justice. One thing I can say is that our representatives do not adequately reflect our values. Fort Bend County, which encompasses the diverse cities of Sugar Land and Katy, has rapidly grown over the past decade, mostly driven through the population increase of ethnic minorities. Because of the nature of redistricting, we remain represented essentially by a single congressional district. The people of our country also continue to be inadequately represented in the Board of Education, the Texas Senate, and depending on where you live inside the labyrinth of district lines, the Texas House cherry picks its Fort Bend voters as well. If the new districts drawn and passed by the 87th Legislature do not reflect the increase in population and the changing demographics of our community, we can call it out for what it is, gerrymandering. Furthermore, if the new districts do not reflect the diverse culture of our community, we can call it out for what it is, gerrymandering. We know of the many districts in Texas that have consistently been gerrymandered to support one political party over the other. Whether it be cracking and packing or ignoring community lines, the districts we have do not reflect our community. There should be no reason that the ethnic and cultural minorities of Congressional District 22 can be represented in the way that we are. The same can be said of the many districts in the state of Texas and Fort Bend County. As our voices continue to be suppressed and our concerns continue to be left unheard, the COVID-19 pandemic has not stopped ravaging our nation. And the only action that has been taken by the Ledge and the governor were measures that made it worse. The Texas power grid continues to be a problem yet to be solved by the legislature. More than 200 people died during Winter Storm Uri, and others were expected to pay thousands in electricity bills. The Texas Ledge is attacking the dignity of racial minorities, censoring education, and stripping away virtually all reproductive rights. Our communities are suffering, and it is because of the shortcomings of the 87th Texas Legislature. Politics has historically held a poor reputation, and I have no reason to disagree after looking at the past several years, especially in Texas. It is clear that our politicians do not represent us any more than they represent themselves. I love what our state can be, but I am disappointed in what our state is. If we want to create a Texas where all people are valued, uplifted, and given justice, we must protect democracy and fight back against partisan gerrymandering. Let us pursue a redistricting process that is open, transparent, and fair to all Texans.
Honestly, I see fair districting as an issue of representation, as an issue of certain communities of color being underrepresented in the electorate. And we can see that it's reflected in who's representing us in every step of our life politically. And we can see that a lot of our elected officials just aren't paying attention to these communities of color because of this unfair districting. And we need to amend that issue because community districting is really the only way in which all of our communities can come together and be harmonious and achieve these same goals that we intended in having a political representation in the first place.
Hello, my name is Jesus Valdez. I live in El Paso, Texas. I am sure that many of you, just like me, see the myriad of issues affecting our communities and are dismayed by the lack of positive actions by our legislators. Let me bring up issues that affect us here in El Paso. Number one, we were attacked by a white supremacist on August 3rd, 2019, who drove 600 miles with the sole intention to kill those that do not look like him. The gunman shot and killed 23 people and injured 23 others. We have an over-militarized police that is too quick to use force against peaceful demonstrators. We have a county judge that had to fight the imposition by our governor against common sense COVID protocols. We have school districts afraid to protect the health of our children because of a threat from our governor to defund them. We have an abusive Border Patrol and ICE who routinely mistreat asylum seekers. We have a new wave of human, civil, and voting rights laws that disproportionately negatively impact people of color. El Paso is now 85% Hispanic, and I could go on. As a retired business person who ran his own company for over 25 years with a focus on quality, I learned that to fix problems, we need to analyze the root causes. One approach to do this is to ask why multiple times. Why are there not laws to mitigate these problems? The answer is because they are either not proposed or not enacted. Why is this? Because party is more important than state or country. And why is this? Because personal interest is more important than common good. And why is this? Because the party in control gerrymanders jurisdiction boundaries for the sole purpose of maintaining power by choosing their constituents, thus slowly destroying our democracy. If there were no gerrymandering, candidates that focus on the needs of the people, not the needs of the party, would have a better chance of being elected. If elected, they would propose and enact laws that begin mitigating common problems. If more solutions are enacted, our state and country would flourish. If we flourish, our democracy would slowly be restored to what we all wish it would be. Bottom line, the practice of gerrymandering must be eliminated and fair maps must be adopted. Thank you.
My name is Lamont Taylor, and I am a 50-year resident of the Hillcrest community, which is bounded by Census Tract 4 and 5 in Corpus Christi, Texas. The first 20 years in the Hillcrest community, I grew up and attended Washington Elementary. Then we moved into Hillcrest proper and attended Crossley Elementary School, junior high school, and attended and graduated from Roy Miller High School in 1971. During that time, the community was a thriving community. Historically, African Americans within the last 8 years were allowed to go and move and live in the Hillcrest residence area. Previous than that, I was next door to Oak Park, which was at that time part of the Country Club edition, which is right over in the Oak Park and Westchester area, was near the Old Country Club in Corpus Christi. However, a funny thing happened in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We had an encroachment in by the refineries in Corpus Christi, and the individuals started moving out. The Anglos started moving out and going to other parts of the city, opening up and providing opportunities for African Americans to move into the Hillcrest area from the Washington and TC Ayers projects. So as we moved in, refineries moved in as well, and the encroachment began. In the early 80s, census changed, and therefore the population of Hillcrest was probably at its near its zenith at that particular time. However, also the proliferation of the refineries inside of Refinery Row, as we know it today, began to matriculate in there. And at that time, it was Southwestern Refineries, now Flint Hills, and Citco had come into the area. Citco West, Citco East. They had Arsarco, which was the leading lead contaminant in the area that we know now. That lead will never be out of the inner harbor. However they try to dredge it, you will still have that part of the harbor contaminated with lead contamination, and also the houses around that particular area as creating what the doctor out of TSU calls the toxic soup from Brownsville up to Lake Charles, Louisiana. But that's another story. But all of those areas are teamed with African Americans and Hispanics and Vietnamese in these particular areas in the state of Texas, and in particular, zooming back into Hillcrest, USA, where now you have majority of the oil coming in from the Midland, Odessa area are coming into that particular area and causing additional depleting of the residents in that area. Between the last decade, between 2000 and 2021, right now to this date, you still have a depopulation and isolating of African Americans in that particular area, where now, if you look at it census tract wise, we were the largest of African Americans in the city, and now we are the least because of the disbursement of the population via the environmental, external, and the other internal environmental aspects that are causing grave havoc for individuals living in Hillcrest area and up to Toloso Midway area. Now you will see that population has decreased, and you still have the proliferation of refineries coming into that area. And it's an easy picking for individual who is creating maps to cherry pick and get the individuals that they need in order to not have a fair representation of anybody of ebony hue in this particular area, or the resources that can come into the area because of the unfair districting, I would say. I wouldn't say the redistricting, I'd say the unfair cherry picking of favorable political opportunities for those individuals in the far right. Again, Hillcrest community was once a thriving area in the city of Corpus Christi, and because of the policies of the city and of the port and of the county, now we are left to fend for ourselves. Once thriving neighborhood has been decimated, and it's systematically been done by the city of Corpus Christi. And back on my far right shoulder is the city where Hillcrest has been picked apart. And I will provide that as evidence in my next. Again, my name is Lamont Taylor, and I lived in the Hillcrest area for the last 50 years, and I am advocating for fair districting for the Hillcrest area, as well as citizens of Ebony Hue in Corpus Christi, Texas. Thank you for your consideration. Again, my name is Lamont Taylor, and I will be pleased to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much. God bless you.
We are the League of Women Voters, Corpus Christi area. My name is Catherine Oler, President. In 2016, the Flint, Michigan water crisis erupted and sent waves across the nation, including Corpus Christi. At the time, Corpus Christi too had a history of water issues, bacteria contamination, low disinfectant levels. Could we have lead problems too? Our league is familiar with issues. They are the basis for our advocacy. So members voted to make this issue the focus of a grassroots community study, potential for lead contamination in our community's drinking water. A lead study committee gathered information for several years on lead poisoning, looking at sources of lead in homes, at water quality regulations, and incidents of lead poisoning. What they discovered was that overall, the city's water system was in pretty good shape. However, there are data gaps that impede further investigation, analysis, and remediation of lead in drinking water. For instance, there are not survey records for all the water service lines, particularly in older neighborhoods. They also learned that the EPA base level of lead in water, which most water systems use, is 3 times higher than the FDA standard for bottled drinking water. Through open records requests, they discovered which zip codes had the highest number of cases and focused on those within Nueces County. They found during the study period that there were elevated blood lead levels in over 50 children per year. Recent updated data told them that the county continues to have reported cases at a rate of 40 to 50 per year. There is no safe level of lead in blood, and those most at risk are infants, young children, and women of childbearing age. Lead's cognitive effect on infants and children are devastating and irreversible. Many of the identified zip codes have older subdivisions built before the law that banned lead from drinking water pipes and lines was enacted. Many of these older neighborhoods are home to people of color and lower economic status and the elderly, communities historically overlooked and disenfranchised. It is critical to keep these communities most affected by lead contamination intact. It is vital for their health and well-being. It is critical that they receive information about lead exposure and simple, inexpensive steps for lessening their risk of exposure. It is critical that existing water codes are enforced and new ones implemented to protect children and women. And it is vital to seek government support in addressing this issue. Last month, the United States Senate passed its bipartisan infrastructure bill. It includes a $15 billion allocation to fund lead pipe removal. How this funding is spread out across the nation is in the hands of the people we elected to represent us, the people who are now drawing our maps. It is critical that this issue is not lost in bureaucratic shuffle between districts within the same county lines. We need our legislatures to draw fair maps that keep our county intact so that our efforts to address this issue locally are not dealt a losing hand. It is imperative that the voices of women and children are heard, not muted, not overlooked, not left on the table because of unfair and unjust districting.
My name is Danita Jones, and I reside in Dallas, Texas, within Dallas County. I'm a tri-chair with the Texas Poor People's Campaign and also a co-president of the Lake Highlands Area and More, Moms and More Against Racism, and also a precinct chair. I'm here today to testify to let you know that my community should be kept together because of the progress that has been made in recent years to improving safety, improving our public parks, and becoming a community of individuals who value community over self. Community leaders such as myself have worked long and hard to preserve the community in which we live, to enhance it. We have done so by working with our representatives and across racial lines. The ease of continuing the work started will be jeopardized by splitting our community in half or by adding another representative. We are a community of beautiful people of different nationalities, ethnicities, and religions, but we are a community. My community is the northern part of 635 of the Lake Highlands area where Forest and Odelia intersect. We have been unjustly left out of economic development due to the previous gerrymandered districts. And now that we have representations and our officials are hearing and working for us, the people, you want to redraw the lines again, to drown out the voices of Black and brown Texans because we want and deserve does not fit your narrative. We want fair districting that will set the foundation for the next 10 years and give our community a chance at equal and fair representation. That way our elected officials will listen to us and fight for us. Working people, communities of color, our immigrant brothers and sisters are the ones who are hurt the most when this map drawing doesn't go the way it should. Let's be clear. Racism has driven the maps that we currently have. In 2011, Texas drew maps that intentionally discriminated against people of color. And in closing, I have one question for you. I ask you, which side are you on? Because I'm on the people side. And as an elected official, you should also be on the people side. Thank you.
Through the efforts of SCOPE and a strong voting rights bill, we are confident in breaking the shackles which have so long crippled the Negroes' advancement in the South. Our battle cry is, let my people vote. Hi, I'm Randall Bryant, founder of the North Texas Municipal Redistricting Project. This profound quote was penned by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 12 days before the House's approval of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act, a bill that followed the most infamous Bloody Sunday on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, was the second of three pillars gained by minorities in the 1960s between the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. A keystone legislation that not only prohibited racial discrimination in voting, but more importantly to redistricting, granted us pro-action with the Section 5 pre-clearance, requiring new redistricting plans gain pre-approval from the Attorney General, and our reaction with Section 2, granting us access to the courts if new maps were drawn in a manner that abridged the rights of minorities to elect the representatives of our choice. But as the old saying goes, the more things change, the more they remain the same. In 2013, a U.S. Supreme Court decision in the case of Shelby County versus Holder struck down Section 5 from the Voting Rights Act by a 5-4 vote, which removed pre-clearance from the redistricting process in Texas. So what does this mean for our Texas statewide redistricting strategy, and in particular for North Texas? We see that Dallas and Tarrant counties have naturally gained population over the past decade, due in part to their sheer size. but percentage-wise, 4 of the top 10 fastest growing counties across the state are Kaufman, Rockwall, Denton, and Collin. And when we look back in history and understand that by way of apportionment and through the protections of the Voting Rights Act, minorities in North Texas were able to gain Congressional District 30 in 1991 and District 33 in 2011. Now, more than ever, it is time that we fight to maintain and expand minority electable districts for our Congressional, State Senate, and State House maps. So I ask you to join me in Fair Maps, Texas on Monday, September 20th for the opening gavel of our 3rd suppression session of this 87th legislature and rally with Texans from every corner of our great state as we fight to maintain the Voting Rights Act and demand a fair and open redistricting process. I'll see you on the battlefield.
Hello, my name is Hassani Burton. I wanted to take a little time to share with you some thoughts on mapping our futures. All across North Texas, where I reside, we have seen the effects of gerrymandered districts that deteriorates the power of communities to choose who represents us. We have seen this in education, with less resources for our hardworking teachers to guide students to options to live their best lives. We have seen this in our economics, where working parents have to spend more hours or sometimes take on 2nd or 3rd jobs just to make ends meet and provide for their families. We have seen this in our healthcare, where billions of dollars are left on the table, leaving millions without access and reducing their quality of life. We have seen this in the most fundamentals of our democracy, with voting rights systemically under attack. Gerrymandering is cheating, plain and simple. It allows legislators a pass into office without having to earn a single new vote. It doesn't matter if you are red, yellow, black, white, or brown, woman or man, Democrat, Republican, or independent. Gerrymandering destroys community influence. Gerrymandering diminishes democracy. I don't want that for my future. I don't want that for my child's future. I don't want that for your future. Under the current political climate, if we allow gerrymandered maps to stand during the redistricting special session, we will spend the next 30 years falling. So I'm asking you to join the League of Women Voters and advocate for fair maps. Let's end gerrymandering in 2021. Stay safe and God bless.
Hello, my name is Dr. Michelle Cohen, and I am the founder of a community organization called Hayes Latinos United. My organization was founded as a direct response to the racial disparities of COVID-19 against Latinos in Hayes County. As a community member, I witnessed a significant lack of resources and a response to the Latino population. Before the organization was formed, I would set up small tables and give away free masks to individuals coming to sites for COVID testing. I did this because our county was not organizing free PPE resources to our community like Travis County had. It was through frustration, anger, and data that prompted the formation of Hayes Latinos United. We started small with donated items such as sanitizer and masks and held drive-through PPE events in East Hayes County. Through my own personal knowledge and research, I know a large portion of our Latinos community lives in east of I-35 in Hayes County. As more events took place, the evidence of what the community did not have was very apparent. Our Latino population is 96,000 strong in Hayes County, and currently only 26% have had one dose of the vaccine and 25% are fully vaccinated. Throughout the pandemic, Latinos has had the highest number of COVID deaths, hospitalizations, confirmed cases, and a high positivity rate. And now we are one of the groups in Hays County least vaccinated. Many mistakes and barriers were created for our Latino population, from the testing rollout to the vaccination efforts. Our group has been able to survive by developing partnerships with Hays Emergency Management, local community health clinics, small and large businesses, other nonprofits, and community donations. One of the biggest barriers we faced was the lack of community space to hold events. Between Northeast Hays County to Southeast Hays County, the availability for community resources is limited. In the last 12 months, since Hays Latinos United's inception, we have held over 70 events focused on providing PPE, water, food, COVID testing, and now vaccinations. And yes, food and water, because of the February freeze that happened this year, many of our East Side residents were without water and hot meals. We work diligently to stop the misinformation of COVID to Latinos. The outreach is tiresome but necessary. We demand true representation for our Latino community, for those who truly understand the needs both in English and Spanish. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Teresa Carvajal Rabet, and I'm here along with mi comunidad bilingüe, my fellow Spanish-speaking hermanos y hermanas. I'm an immigrant from Mexico, mestiza by blood, and Mexicana Americana by political boundaries. I live in Dripping Springs, just southwest of Austin, and my community is, in large part, a white, affluent community. Sin embargo, it has a Tejano community that contributed to its founding, and growing pockets of inmigrantes Tejanos and Spanish-speaking communities that have sustained the growth of the gateway to the Texas Hill Country. The population of my area in Hays County has exploded, and one of the most overpopulated state Senate districts, District 25. The Hispanic population in Texas grew by over 1.9 million, now comprising 39.25% of the population. And the Hispanic population is one that grew at the fastest rates, growing over 20% over the course of the last decade. No one has been harmed more by map manipulation and voter suppression than the Black and the Latino communities whose voices have been minimized at the ballot box and in Congress. I own a small business in Dripping Springs. Rather, it's ETJ, Un Centro Comunitario, a community center that provides me the opportunity to meet a diversity of community members. It is my experience that such an extensive district has not allowed candidates and current leaders to experience the diverse history of the Texas Hill Country. Meeting and growing Hispanic population and address such diverse needs. I continue to ask the redistricting committees to allow all Tejanos to give virtual input at every step of the process, most importantly, on the map proposals, and to draw maps that are fair, competitive, and representativos de todos los Tejanos, as well as work to end map manipulation and gerrymandering. Gracias por la oportunidad de compartir mi comentario. I thank you for the opportunity of sharing my statement. Oh no.
My name is Aya Fubaranelli, and I live in Belton in Bell County, Texas. And I am here to speak up against the racial gerrymandering that is occurring in my community. My community is a very racially diverse community. The school district that serves us, Killeen ISD, currently boasts in excess of 70% of students of color. That is right. The demographics of the school district indicate that over 70% of the students attending our school district are students of color. And yet, in all my years of living in this county, although we come out to vote, Black and brown people have largely had their voices silenced as a result of racial gerrymandering. At the inception of this nation, patriots fought against taxation without representation. But that is exactly what Black and brown communities are experiencing in my community. We vote, we pay taxes, and yet our votes are essentially canceled out because majority white communities have been grafted into our voting block, so to speak, which dilutes our own voices. Year after year, we come out and whoever is representing us and our needs gets the votes to win in our community, and then those votes are immediately erased by the all-white, predominantly white rural areas that have been grafted into our voting block. And it's time for that to stop. It is time that we have the representation that we should have as taxpayers, as duly tax-paying citizens of this community. And so we are asking you to stop destroying this nation by redistricting in such a way that it ensures that certain parties or certain individuals can win elections, but to rather give the power back to the people to choose their own representatives. And what happens when we don't have the representation that we deserve? We see things like the food deserts that we're experiencing in North Killeen, and nothing is being done about it. We see the rise of urban area issues, including crime, that is not being adequately addressed, while areas such as Lampasas that are largely rural and largely white have their issues addressed. We see Fort Hood carved out of our voting block, even though Fort Hood is part of our school district. It makes absolutely no sense for you to claim to be representing us while you are systematically ensuring that our voices are silenced. And we won't stand for it anymore. And we're asking nicely that the redistricting that occurs take into consideration the voices of every citizen, and that you stop gerrymandering by race. You stop gerrymandering, period, but certainly that you stop racial gerrymandering so that we again can take control of our communities and have representatives who care about us, who live in our communities, who work in our communities, who have offices in our communities, and who serve our needs and not the needs of others. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rick Galvan. My pronouns are he, him. I am a student at UT Austin, and I am the Central Texas Campus Organizer for Texas Rising. Texas Rising is a project of the Texas Stream Network that focuses on building the political power of the rising generation of young Texans, particularly young Texans of color and LGBTQ+ youth. Young Texans are paying attention to this special session. Young people know full well the power they wield. We're changing the state of Texas every day. We're plugging into our communities and building power on issues like reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ equality, climate justice, and of course, voting rights. So we fully understand what this special session means for our communities and for our political power. And we're not going to let our next 10 years be defined without our input. Young people like myself are not blind to the corrupt practices politicians use to stay in power. When I moved from my hometown San Antonio to Austin for college, I found it quite interesting that the first familiar name I saw when exiting I-35 was Representative Lloyd Doggett. My dad's congressman back in San Antonio now also represented me 81 miles away here in Austin. Further, I found it more odd when my cousin, a student at Texas State University, living in San Marcos, told me Representative Lloyd Doggett was also his congressman. That's one congressional district for 3 very different communities. But my uneasy feeling didn't end there. As the 2018 election neared and candidates campaigned around my university, I learned that the moment I stepped off campus at UT and crossed Guadalupe Street to go to work, I was also crossing congressional districts, and not even Lloyd's, 2 other congressional districts. Congressional District 25 encapsulates all of UT Austin, but then weaves through Austin and out towards Fort Worth. District 21, meanwhile, the district right across Guadalupe Street from UT, covers bits of Austin and stretches down I-35 through San Marcos and back to my hometown of San Antonio. Meaning, Representative Chip Roy represents some of my friends from high school in San Antonio, many of my cousins' peers in San Marcos, and many of my friends at UT who live just west of campus. It makes no sense for Austin to be carved up into multiple congressional districts to the point that every day when I go from my apartment in one part of town to campus and then to work just a few blocks away, that I cross through 3 congressional districts. And it makes no sense that 2 of those districts snake through San Marcos and San Antonio, and one of those districts nearly touches Fort Worth, all representing young people in Austin. So what do young people think when we learn about these districts? It's obvious. These district lines are drawn to dilute our political power while unfairly favoring one party over another. We demand that this redistricting process is transparent and provides the people of Texas with fair maps that no longer cut up communities and shrink the power of voters. To the Texas Legislature, I leave you with a saying that has long stuck with me and seems to fit the energy of young Texans right now. If you do not respect us, you must expect us. See you soon.
My name is Dave Cortez. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club and our more than 25,000 members across Texas. I speak to you today from Congressional District 21, State House 49, and Senate District 14 in South Austin. But I come to you with concerns about the greater Austin area at large, especially communities we organize with who are disproportionately impacted by this process that we're here today talking about, by climate change, by COVID-19, and by environmental racism. Historically, the impacts of these issues have landed harder on East Austin, but as we've seen with the rain bomb floods on Halloween of 2013, then again in 2015, and with the Blanco River flooding down in Wimberley and Hayes County, just south of where I am, and with flooding elsewhere, climate change is here. And our communities phase connected to our neighbors upstream and downstream via watersheds, floodplains, and creek systems. When 20 inches of rain dumps on upstream communities around where I live, on the Onion Creek watershed in CD 21, where there's sprawl and impervious cover that overwhelms our infrastructure system's ability to manage that runoff, when that rain falls up here, it is the downstream communities along Onion and Williamson Creek and into some of the poorest communities of Austin, communities that are majority Black and Latino, poor and working class families, not all, but mostly east of 35. It is these communities that have and will continue to bear the greatest burden of these climate disasters, a burden of lost homes, of lost wages and work, of lost culture, of lost community and friendships, and in many cases, unfortunately, lost loved ones. Whereas upstream communities in my district in CD21 have more modern stormwater management systems, like arroyos, ditches, and retention ponds, and all this very wonderful stuff now. It's the people of color downstream in eastern Travis County that have infrastructure that's a relic of the 1980s and like the stuff I used to play in as a kid and skateboard and run around. That stuff can't handle these new storms. That infrastructure can't handle these new storms. And it is those folks who will continue to suffer because of that lack of infrastructure. This is injustice. This plainly is environmental racism. And it is upheld by a charade of a process that allows politicians to choose their constituents and not the other way around. Politicians who don't believe in climate change representing Austin, those folks outnumber those who try to address this issue and do believe in climate change and are trying to right these wrongs and solve these inequities. The people of Central Texas living within and along shared watersheds and floodplains, they represent a shared community of interest, several shared communities of interest, and they must be considered accordingly with maps, new maps that are drawn. The Sierra Club, we will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends and neighbors, not because we all wanted to speak up for the environment, but because we believe in the power and potential of our unity, of our shared interest in the greater good. And we'll walk with everyone here today and everyone out there listening in defending these lands and our rights to a fair and accessible democracy, our rights to a healthy life for our families and neighbors. Thank you very much.
My name is Shelley Hayes McMahon, and I am a Texas COVID survivor. I am currently fighting long COVID. So every day is a challenge, and I'm still fighting to get back to my full health because of the people that I love and the work that I do. The work that I do is to ensure that future leaders of Texas are diverse, responsible, responsive, and women. COVID landed on the state and my family like a ton of bricks. I was in the hospital for almost 2 weeks and was released from the hospital the day our grid failed. So coming home to a cold house in a fragile condition, having survived what has been the worst experience of my life, it's unbelievable to me that we are still hearing disinformation, ignoring the public good, and ignoring science. Clearly, the priorities and policies of the Texas Legislature are out of step with millions of Texans just like me. And gerrymandering ensures that virtually none of them can or will be held accountable for what their neglect and mismanagement has done to my family and my community. The census is very clear. Texas has grown by millions of people, and 95% of the growth was in the Latino, African American, and AAPI communities. The proposed Senate maps dilute the voices and votes of the people of my city and my community.
And that is the last of the testimonials. I wanted to open it up to any questions right now. If anyone does have questions, I'm also going to drop my email in the chat. So if you would like to get connected with any of the folks that were featured during the press conference, you have the ability to do so. If anyone has a question, if you could raise your hand. Hey, Sydney, are you there? Sydney, can you hear me? No? Okay. Did anyone else have any other questions? Shannon, can you hear me?
Yes, I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, yes.
Good. So if there are groups that would like to maybe show some of this testimony again, because it was very powerful, is there a way to get a hold of it so that we can show it in the future?
Yeah, so we are recording this right now. I also will be posting the full length version of everyone's testimonials on YouTube later today, and I'll be sure to share that out with everyone.
Thank you.
I did want to say thank you to everyone that did participate and submit a testimonial. This was amazing, and we really thank you for everyone's time and efforts on this. Donnie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you for letting us all come together in this way. I think this was a very powerful platform. And my question is, where do we as a group go next from here? How can we build on this momentum and keep the progress going?
We will be inviting everyone that participated onto those weekly calls that we have for the Big Tent Coalition. But most importantly, now that the legislature has started drawing the maps, and over the weekend they released their proposed Senate draft maps, we want to encourage everyone to participate in the upcoming committee hearings that they will be holding. Hopefully they will be allowing the public to provide input on the maps. We'll have to wait and see what their plan is and what their strategy is, but that our voices in this process are going to be absolutely instrumental to getting maps that reflect our communities. So please be on the lookout for notices, not only from the League of Women Voters, but from all of the groups in the Fair Maps Texas Coalition. And in that Big Tent call that we have, we'll be alerting folks in the community for upcoming opportunities to participate in those committee hearings.
Good deal. Thanks again. Stay safe, everybody.
You too. Thanks so much for participating. We appreciate you. Okay, if no one else has any other questions, I have dropped my email in the chat. Sydney, are you raising your hand to get? Let me try one more time. Did you have a question? Not sure what's happening. Okay, if anyone else has questions. Oh wait, I see Elisa asked. Hey Elisa, how are you?
I'm fine, Stephanie. This has been quite fantastic. I do have a question. A couple of questions are in the chat, by the way. But what are our options if, and I might say when, the majority of maps are drawn to be unfair? What can we continue to do as your, basic participant activist?
So as these maps are being drawn, so the Senate, as I mentioned earlier, did release their draft maps, and there are some changes from the last decade, but a lot of the districts still look very heavily gerrymandered. So this is a very crucial part, a crucial time of the redistricting process. So the Fair Maps Texas Coalition and members of this Big Tent group, remember, we pushed really hard to get the legislature to make improvements in that redistricting process this time around to include the public more. And so now during this upcoming week or two, when they're going to be actually holding committee hearings on the maps, we need to show up and we need to participate in those hearings, and we need to provide input on how those maps are impacting our community. A lot of them still crack and pack our communities significantly. And it does, the current maps does ensure that the Republican majority maintains control of the legislature, even though that's not what our most recent elections have shown, where Democrats are inching up closer to the 45 to 50% mark as far as the election turnout and results go. So what we need is we need folks to show up and provide that testimony, because that testimony becomes very important in cases for future litigation, where we, if the legislator does intentionally discriminate against voters of color in the maps, we can turn around and file litigation to protect those voters of color.
Stephanie, there is a question from Liz Wally in the chat. What do you think about the Freedom to Vote Act in relations to redistricting?
The Freedom to Vote Act is the Manchin proposal, is that correct? Liz,
Yes.
Liz, if you're here, I was going to take you off mute. Are you here still? See if I can find her. Liz, are you still here? You might not want to talk. Are you
Can
here?
you hear me?
We can. How are you doing this morning?
Fine.
So,
Yes, the Freedom to Vote Act is what was For the People Act, and it is excellent, and it does include redistricting.
oh, is it For the People Act or is it the Manchin Compromise that you're talking about?
Well, it's confusing, but the Manchin one is the Freedom to Vote Act, which was HR 1, but everyone who was behind HR 1 is now behind the Freedom to Vote Act.
I wouldn't say everyone.
Well, it's the way to go at this point, and hopefully it will well actually be put up and be filibustered, which supposedly will then convince Manchin to do something about the filibuster, and then we will be able to pass this. But both of them can have redistricting in it, which would affect ours and could affect it even if our bills had already passed.
Right. And
which
so
is a major deal.
I'll speak on the redistricting component.
Yeah.
I'm not going to speak on whether or not I like one over the other, because I truly like the original. And
yes, but
yeah. But the Manchin Act, I saw that they would apply the parts about redistricting retroactively. However, the compromise bill does not include any provisions about creating an independent commission. It does outlaw partisan gerrymandering, but it only applies to this decade of redistricting litigation. I don't know if I mentioned, but that would also apply to maps that retroactively. So if the legislature does pass maps and this new US congressional bill does pass, then they would have to go back and fix the maps once more. The For the People Act, though, was way more comprehensive. It would allow for independent commissions for our congressional districts here in Texas, which would be a huge improvement. I believe it also outlined partisan gerrymandering, and the bill has such a rich plethora of reforms to really clean up our democracy and make it work for the people. That's what a lot of folks are still, I know, at least for the Poor People's Campaign, we are still pushing for the full entirety of the For the People Act to pass. We're also pushing for an end to the filibuster. But I understand that folks do want to make those compromises because at this point, something would be better than nothing at all. I guess. Yeah,
that is realistic.
Well, we have yet
we
to
have to have it. We have to have it, and we have to have it soon, or we lose our democracy. So,
right. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see, though, if there are, I think, 10 Republicans that are willing to sign on to that as well. So I guess time will tell.
Oh, I don't think anyone expects that. I think what is expected is that Manchin will have to then do something with the filibuster, because there is no other option.
Did anyone else have any other questions? No? Okay. So we will be circulating a recording of this event. Like I mentioned, I'll be sharing it out as a press advisory. So any members of the press can go back and pick out quotes if you'd like to use those. Can also connect you with the folks that were included in the press conference. We'll also be posting this on our website and on YouTube as well. All right. Thank you guys so much for participating. We really appreciate everyone. Thanks so much.
Steph?
Yeah.
Could you put your email in the chat?
I did. Let me do it one more time.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thanks you guys for being here. We really appreciate all of you. There we go. All right, thanks you guys.
Thank you.